Good morning. All right, we'll start in a couple of minutes, but while you're waiting, if you want to gather some props, you'll need a chair and a blanket, just if you need some padding under your knees, if you're on your knees on the floor. You will need a block or book or something that has just a little bit of weight to it, and a belt, a yoga belt, or just a regular belt that you wear, or a scarf. If you have a stretchy band, you can also use that, have that. Nice. We have our little guest joining us today. So if you didn't get the props or hear the list of props that you'll want to get a chair and a blanket if you need something under your knees when you're kneeling, and a belt or a yoga strap or a scarf, or if you have a stretchy band, you can get a stretchy band. Our focus today is going to be on the muscles and joints that are used with breathing. So we're going to practice a lot of breathing exercises today, for different stretches to mobilize the joints that are needed to expand your thoracic cavity. We'll start in just one more minute. Okay, so we're going to get started sitting on your chair. If you feel comfortable sitting on the floor, that's also fine. You just want to make sure that in whatever position you're sitting in. My spine. You want to be sitting right on the base of your sitting bones. You don't want to be rounding your back like this, sitting toward the back of the sitting bone. So if it takes a lot of effort for you to sit on the floor in this position with your spine upright, then you're better off sitting on a chair or getting a bunch of blankets stacked on the floor to sit comfortably on the floor. So the key here really with sitting is just that you're comfortable so we can focus on other things. And while you're sitting here, just see if you can bring your shoulders over your hips. And once you've found a comfortable position, just bring awareness to the space between your neck, shoulders, ribs, and belly. And I want you to pay attention as you go through your normal breath cycle, not trying to change the way that you're breathing, but just breathe and let the breath come naturally, and see where you feel movement happening with each breath. So is that movement happening in your belly? You feel some movement in your ribs, in your neck and shoulders, and it could be a combination. So just take a couple minutes to observe that, and I'm just going to use our special guest to demonstrate something. So as there are many different areas in your torso that move to expand your thoracic cavity, which allows for your lungs to expand more. One of the ways is that your belly expands and contracts, comes out, allowing the diaphragm, which is the muscle of breathing. It attaches onto the bottom of the rib cage and also the spine, where the lumbar and thoracic spine meet, just in this area. And so when you take a breath in, your belly may expand out and that muscle flattens out. So as the muscle flattens out, it makes a little bit more space in the chest to allow for the lungs to expand. The other thing that happens is that your rib cage has the ability to also expand and move. And a lot of times when you think of chest breathing or taking a deep breath into your ribs, you think of lifting the chest up to take a breath, right? So take a breath. See how my chest looks like it's moving, lifting up. That's kind of an illusion in terms of seeing that the rib cage is moving, because actually where the rib cage moves is in the back. So where the ribs attach to the spine, you have 12 ribs on each side, which correlate to your 12 thoracic vertebrae. And so at those little joints is where the ribs actually move. And what happens is when you take a breath in, the ribs lift up. And as each rib lifts up, that also creates an expansion of the thoracic cage to allow for more expansion of the lungs and therefore more oxygen coming into the body. And so a lot of times if there's tightness through the thoracic spine and at both at the joints between each thoracic vertebrae and also at the joints between each vertebrae and the rib cage, if there's any tightness in there, that can limit your body's ability to take in more oxygen, especially if you're doing something that requires abdominal engagement. So if you're carrying something heavy and still needing to breathe, you need to have a different access point to expand the thoracic cage. You also have your neck muscles here, kind of muscles that are attaching to the first rib and going up to your neck, and those help to bring your shoulders up, which creates a little bit more space in your thoracic cage to get more oxygen in. But those muscles ideally are just used for in times of stress. So they're not really meant to be your everyday breathing muscles, but they still are there in case you need some extra oxygen or extra support. So now, as you pay attention to where your go-to movement is for your breath, let's kind of play with a couple, changing things a little bit and getting a little bit more movement in different areas, just to create some variation. So first, what I want you to do is pay attention to your belly and let it completely relax. If it helps you to take a deep breath and breathe out through your mouth or your nose, and let all of the muscles of your belly relax. And see if you can keep that relaxation in your abdominal muscles as you continue to breathe. So it doesn't mean that there has to be no movement in your belly, but just try to have a little bit less movement as well as a little bit less tension. And see if you can feel your breath somewhere else. So the more you hold in your stomach, just on a regular basis as a habit, the more that your abdominal contents are pushing up on your diaphragm. So it's limiting that movement, the movement of that muscle. So if you can relax your belly completely, now we're going to transition to all fours. And as we transition from position to position, I also want you to pay attention to your breath. Are you holding your breath as you transition? Are you able to keep your belly relaxed? Are you able to keep your shoulders relaxed as you move from different positions? So we're going to come on to all fours. And we're going to work on releasing your belly in this position. So here we have gravity helping to pull the belly down. Your wrists are under your shoulders if that's okay for your wrists. If not, you can always lean back just a little bit and have support under your knees if they need that. You're going to take a breath in, and on your exhale, just let your belly drop down. Try not to let your chest drop, but it doesn't necessarily matter at this moment, but really focus on letting the belly drop toward the floor. You can take a couple deep breaths, and on each exhale, let your belly drop and release a little bit more. You can let your head drop down. If you let your head drop down, it kind of takes your neck and shoulders out of the equation here. Now curl your toes under. And starting with your belly relaxed, and throughout this exercise, again, you want to continue your normal breath. So if at any point you start to hold your breath, then it's a signal to take a break. So with your toes curled under, you're going to press your toes and your hands into the floor without bracing your abdominal muscle. So don't hold your belly in. At first, you're going to let your belly relax, press your hands and your feet into the floor, and lift your knees up to hover. And then lower back down. And let everything in your abdominal region relax. So just play with that a couple times at your own pace. And what you want to have happen is to feel your abdominal muscles engage, but only in response to the movement that you're creating. Only in response to lifting the knees up, not because you're consciously engaging your abdominal muscles. And between each rest, or between each lift, when your knees are down, make sure that your belly goes back to being relaxed. So this is a good exercise to practice releasing your abdomen, but also feeling the engagement and then getting the muscles to relax. And again, you don't want to be holding your breath. So when your knees are hovering, you still want to be able to breathe. Let your belly relax. And do that a couple more times. Lift. And relax. Okay, now we're going to come back to the chair, or come back to sitting, whatever position you were in. And you're going to want your strap or belt. Now find your seated stance where you're on the base of your sitting bones, shoulders are stacked over your hips. And now you're just going to have your hands on your rib cage, the front lower ribs. And you're going to take a couple breaths here, keeping your belly relaxed, and see if you can feel movement under your hands. Without letting your shoulders lift up. This might happen. Try to keep your shoulders relaxed. So the muscles that lift your rib cage up and down, they're called intercostal muscles, and they're in between each of the ribs. And there's some on the outside and some on the inside of the ribs. So see if you can keep your belly completely relaxed. And just move your ribs with each breath. Now, if at any point that you start to feel out of breath or like you can't breathe, just go back to your normal breath and take a few resting breaths. Now what you're going to do is, keeping the contact point of your sitting bones on the chair or the floor, you're going to drop your chest and let your front lower ribs drop down and kind of tuck in a little bit. So your head may come forward just a little bit and your shoulders may come forward. That's perfectly fine. And now see if you can relax your belly and take a couple breaths into your rib cage, pressing your ribs into your hands. If you're clenching your jaw or tensing your shoulders to try to do this, relax all of the muscles that aren't needed to be doing this exercise. And the movement may be really tiny, and it also may just be a thought or an intention to move the ribs. If those muscles if your intercostal muscles haven't been used much lately, then they may be challenging to access at first. Now you're going to take your belt and you're going to wrap it around at about where a heart rate monitor is or a bra strap. You're going to cross in the front, you're going to cross the belt. You want to have a little bit of tension here. If you have any history of osteoporosis, especially in your rib cage, or osteopenia, if those bones have any brittleness to them, you want to, when you engage the intercostal muscles, you want to just engage them lightly. So have a little bit of tension here, and you have your hands. Press your rib cage into the belt so that your hands come closer together. Change it up. See what it feels like to breathe through your mouth and the difference between breathing through your nose. Now, so we started with the ribs dropped. Now see what it's like to lift the chest up. Go like this. And take a couple breaths in that position. And take some breaths. There may be some movement down here, but not as much up here. But it's always good to play with different angles and positions. Now you're going to take the belt and move it up to your armpits. We're going to do the same thing. So your ribs extend all the way up to about where your collarbones are. And so you can get movement and expansion of the ribs all the way up to there. So let's play with this upper part. So it's the same position. You're going to have a cross with the belt and have your hands holding the belt, but enough that your shoulders, you want your shoulders to be relaxed away from your ears. Sitting bones planted down into wherever you're sitting. Let the chest drop just a little bit. And now you're going to take a breath in. Try to press your ribs into the belt to bring your hands closer toward each other. And on your exhale, squeeze your ribs together and bring your hands apart. If you notice your head and neck are getting tight, you can always drop it down. Let your head hang. And as you do this, notice if you're tensing in your abdomen at all, or your jaw, or your neck and shoulders. Now, if having this belt around is a good guide for you, you can continue using that. If you're able to get movement or feel movement in your ribs without the belt, you can also take it off at any time. But here we were working on just sitting straight and breathing. So now we're going to change positions of the thoracic region and practice breathing from those different angles. Okay, so now we're going to, if you're using the strap, bring it down just a little bit. You're going to tilt. So here, keep both sitting bones on the floor, on the chair or the floor. And take a couple breaths, maybe 3 to 5 breaths. Bending your torso one way. And then bending the other way. The more your rib cage and chest are dropped, the more you can access where the rib cage attaches to the spine. So you can access more movement of the rib cage. Back up, bring the belt a little bit higher, your armpits, tilt to one side, and take a couple breaths here. Letting the chest drop, Belly relax, shoulders relax. And again, even if the movements are just tiny, that's fine. You're just developing a new awareness of these muscles and joints. And moving to the other side, keeping both sitting bones equally planted down. You may notice in certain positions it's a lot easier to breathe than other positions. Come back up to center. And bring the belt down. And now we're going to twist. Twist to your right. Take a couple breaths here. On each inhale, trying to push your ribs into the belt to get your hands closer together. And on your exhale, hands come farther apart. So if you notice as you twist that one knee is looks shorter, one thigh looks shorter than the other, so keep your knees in line with each other and just twist from the trunk. So kind of a trick to do that is as you twist to the right, push your right knee forward. That pulls the right side of the pelvis forward and allows you to just twist as far as you can go in your trunk. And you may notice that that movement is a lot smaller now that you've kept your knees even, and that's fine. It just gives you a more honest sense of how much you can actually rotate in your torso. And then twist to the left. As you twist to the left, push your left knee forward. And take a couple breaths here. Relaxing your belly, relaxing your shoulders, your neck. Neck to center, bring the belt up a little bit higher. Your armpits, and twist to the right, pushing the right knee forward. A couple breaths here. And then twist to the left. And come back to center. You can take the belt off. Go back to your normal breath. We're going to come to the floor. Again, pay attention to your breathing as you transition. You lay on your side and have a pillow or something for your head. You're going to lay on your side so that your bottom leg is straight and then your top knee is bent and on the floor in front of you. Your bottom hand is resting on your top ribs. So you're laying on your left hand is on your right ribs. Now we're going to do some circles with our arms. So this exercise you can has a lot of variations, but this variation you're going to keep your shoulders stacked, and we're going to just do some circles with our arms. So just move your arms in a range of motion that feels comfortable to your shoulder. And here, same thing, you want to keep breathing throughout the entire exercise. And you want to keep make sure your hand is on your ribs to keep your ribs from moving. So another way to help with breathing and help with mobility of your thoracic cage is actually getting more mobility in your shoulders so that when you use your arms, if you're reaching or lifting things, you're not also tensing your ribs. Change directions. Keep breathing throughout this exercise. Bring your arm by your side, and you're just going to reach your arm over your head, trying to get your fingertips to touch over your head, or fingertips to touch the floor over your head, and then come back to your side. Here, reach as far as you can over your head without lifting the ribs here. And keep the ribs down and reach your arm. What this also does is it allows your abdominal muscles to engage just enough to keep your ribs down, so it creates a little toning of your abdominal muscles. Now we're going to do a couple circles. This time, you're going to open your chest up to the ceiling. So here, you're going to get a little bit more movement, not just in your shoulders, but in your ribs and your chest and your spine. So make the circles as a little bit bigger, but only as big as that you can keep your top knee on the floor. So if your knee starts to lift up, you're trying to open up a little bit too far. So keep the knee down and do some big circles. And then continuing to breathe. Change directions. All right, now we're going to transition to the other side. Again, pay attention to your breath as you go to get up. Do you hold your breath to try to get up, or can you continue breathing throughout the entire transition? The transitions are just as important as the movements and the exercises themselves, because if you're holding your breath to get from point A to point B, chances are as you're going throughout your day, that same thing may be happening. So just an awareness point to think about. When are you holding your breath and when are you breathing? Can you be breathing all of the time, no matter what position your body's in, or no matter what exercise you're doing? So have your bottom leg straight out, top knee bent in front of you so that your knee is on the floor. You're going to have your bottom hand on your top ribs. Keep your shoulders stacked, and you're going to just do some circles with your arms. Your top arm. Without opening your chest up. So keep the shoulders stacked. And if you feel any pinching or pain in your shoulder, don't make the circles as big. So you can make the circles smaller. You may feel some pops or clicks, which are okay as long as you don't feel pain with them. And then change directions. Remembering to breathe. There's not necessarily, just follow your normal rhythm of breathing. So don't try to think about, I need to inhale on this part of the exercise and exhale on that part. Just breathe normally and do the exercise at whatever pace you're doing it. Have your arm by your side. You're going to reach your arm over your head as far as you can. Fingertips moving away from your toes and toward the floor without letting the ribs lift. And then come back. And again. And come back. And again. And now we're going to do some bigger circles, opening the chest. So you can keep your other hand on your ribs if you want, or you don't have to. But make sure that your top knee stays on the floor. So as you reach your arm as far as you can, Don't let this knee pop up. That'll just give you a sense of how far you can open your chest and still be moving in your ribs and trunk, as opposed to in your pelvis. Still breathing. And then change directions with your arm. All right, now pay attention to how you breathe as you transition to sitting. Again, you can sit in the chair or sit on the floor, whatever allows you to sit comfortably with your spine upright and your sitting bones on the floor. So have something. You can have a block, you can use your blanket, anything that you have around. And now whatever position that you're sitting in, stack your shoulders over your hips, drop the chest and the ribs, and just take a moment to check in with your breath. Check in with what parts of your body are now moving as you breathe. Maybe the same as in the beginning of the class. It may be different. You may feel some new sensations. Now you're going to put your hands on one of your hands on your lower ribs. So here the chest and the ribs are dropped down without rounding the low back. So you're still sitting on the base of your sitting bones. One hand is on your ribs just for a reference. And you're going to reach your other arm up to the ceiling and then come down. And as you reach, see how high you can reach without letting the ribs push up and forward into your hands. So how far can you reach? And then you're going to reach in different directions. You have to reach to the side, reach behind you, reach over. So the less movement you can have in your rib cage here, as you reach, the more you have, more openness you have in the back of your ribs to continue breathing while you are using your arms for something, for reaching in this case. Switch hands and reach in different directions. And only reach as high as you can or as far as you can that you can maintain a still and dropped rib cage. And still be breathing. Now, if you want to add a challenge to this, adding some weight. So again, it depends on what props you have. The heavier, the more challenging. So switch arms and hold on to something. It doesn't necessarily have to be heavy, but anything that you're holding adds a little bit of weight. Use your other hand on your ribs to keep them down, or just as a reference point. And see if you can now lift something a little bit heavier and still breathe and still be able to keep, you can switch hands, to be able to keep your ribs down. So being able to breathe is important. You can stop in one position and try taking a deep breath here. You may notice if you're holding something heavy, the more you're moving your arms, the more your heart rate maybe is going up a little bit. There's a higher demand for oxygen, so you need to take a deeper breath just reflexively in order to get more oxygen into the tissues that are being used. So in your arm, in this case. You switch arms, you can change whatever you're holding. So this is flimsy, the block is hard, but one's a little heavier than the other. So it just changes how your body's experiencing movement. And now maybe try and twist. Let's say you're holding something and you need to place it down. Or you're handing something to someone. And you continue breathing in this position. You had to pause and wait. And then switch. Or reach up without letting your rib cage lift up. So you can do this with one hand, you can do it with two hands. And then place that down and just check in with your breath again. And that's the class for today. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box on the right. If the chat box is hiding, there's a little tab at the top right of the video that should say open chat or something like that. And you can type something in and I'll do my best to answer it. Thanks for joining me. Another position you can play around with breathing is laying down. So we laid on our side, you can lay on your back and see what it feels like to breathe. Take some deep breaths, reach, move your arms around. That's another position that you can practice breathing in as well. So was it that you weren't able to get your knees to come off the floor? Is that what was happening, or is that? Or were you feeling pain somewhere when you did it? You physically couldn't do it, or you were just feeling pain somewhere? There's a couple reasons that maybe you couldn't do it. One is physical strength. So in order to get the knees to hover, you need to engage your, especially an abdominal muscle called transverse abdominis. It's a muscle that wraps around from your back all the way around to your front, to your belly. And so that muscle needs to engage in order to get the knees to hover off the floor. There's also, you also will need to engage a little bit of your quads. So that's another muscle that may need to work or may not be working well for you at the moment to help get your knees off the floor. The key really here is to just keep practicing that. So the more you press your hands and your feet into the floor, eventually your knees will start to hover. And even if your knees don't come off, you'll still start to get some engagement. And then over time, your knees may be able to lift up. But what you want to be doing is making sure that, like, you can practice coming back a little bit, so bringing your hips back to lift the knees up at first, just to get a sense, and then over time, don't lean back as far. So maybe at first you need to go like this, and then next, just come back a little bit, and then eventually your hips can be over your knees, and you'll be able to lift up. So there are kind of different ways to scale the exercise to still be able to do it. But it's likely a combination of maybe weakness in the quads and maybe a little bit of abdominal strength as well. Good. Yeah, so keep practicing there, and as it gets easier, you can start to make it a little bit harder and harder over time by bringing your hips closer to being over your knees. And also remember to keep breathing as you do it. That's key. All right, I'm going to sign off. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to send me an email at drmiller@neuravita.com, DRMILLER @Neuravita, NURAVITA.com. Thanks for joining me this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day.